So this is today's editorial, 18th of February 2026, Wednesday. This editorial is basically talking about the new world disorder, which is based on the might, not on the rules. Okay, so earlier what used to happen, that the world order that we were witnessing used to be, by and large used to be based on the rules. Okay, that either used to be framed by the United Nations or some other bodies, okay, at international levels. Okay, so members countries were expected to follow, okay, that rules. Okay, but now what is happening, that under Trump, what is happening, that rules is not rules are no longer are being followed by the US. Okay, for example, you see the case of the Venezuela. So they have breached the sovereignty of the Venezuelan soil, and that is what is Shashi Tharoor sir is trying to say here. That new world order has been created, which is based on the mind. Okay, so let us see. So the title is the new world disorder from rules to mind. So let us dive into deep into this particular piece of information. So a world that once imagined it had worried the demons of the 1930s now finds them prowling again, less dramatic perhaps, but no less corrosive. The post-World War, born in San Francisco in 1947, was built on the conviction that law could re-extend power, that institutions could discipline states, and that sovereignty was not a privilege granted by the strong, but a right inherent in all nations. The speech by United States President Harry S. Truman at the founding of the United Nations UN radiated that belief. He spoke as a man who had seen the abyss and was determined that humanity would not return to it. The UN, he insisted, would be the instrument through which nations settle their differences peacefully, bulwark against the old world of spheres of influence and predatory mind. So basically, he is starting from the thing that the world order that was imagine that it has buried all the demons catastrophe that was created in 1930s. Basically you have in 1930s you had a second world war, okay, from 1934 to 1939. So that has led to lots of destruction across the world. So that is what he is trying to say, that the world that has once imagined it had worried. So a world that has been created post 90 post world war, which means that the Second World War, the order that existed because of so much institutions, like you have the United States, which came into existence in 1945. Okay, has tried to or has led to people imagine that it had buried all the demons of the 1930s. But now that is not that is no longer working. Why? Because this time what is happening, that the sovereignty which used to be not a privilege granted by the strong but a right inherent in all nations is now being breached. Okay, now that we are going to see his words on June 26, 1945 might sound startling to many of his successors. We all have to recognize, no matter how great our strength, he declared, that we must deny ourselves the license to do always as we please. No one nation can or should expect any a special privilege which harms any other nation. Unless we are all willing to pay that price, no organization for world peace can accomplish its purpose. And what a reasonable price that is. Now, we are going to understand about the prevailing atmosphere, means the existing atmosphere. Atmosphere here is nothing but the world order. Okay, so what kind of the world order that is existing right now? So contrast that with the contemporary mood, where the language of international law increasingly sounds like a polite fiction. Okay, so language of international law is no longer existing in the reality. Rather, it is like polite fiction. Fiction means which is something which is not existing, something which you are imagining. Okay, imaginary story, you can say. Analysts often perceived US President Donald Trump's foreign policy posture as one that treats international rules much as Italian drivers treat traffic lights, less as binding commitments and more as optional tools, useful when they serve your interest, dispensable when they do not. Okay, uh, so what analyst is perceiving that the U.S. Trump's foreign policy posture is something which is like Italian drivers who treat traffic lights less as binding commitments and more as optional tools. Okay, so in that sense, U.S. president is so basically the whatever U.S. president is doing with respect to the international rules is like it is like optional tools. If it is favoring the interest of the U.S., then it is good. If not, then it is not good. Okay, so that kind of attitude is basically being adopted by the President Donald Trump. It is not that the US invented unilateralism. Great powers have always been prone to exceptionalism, double standards, and bending rules, just sort of breaking them. Okay, so it is not. So he is saying that it is not that the US is the first country or US has invented unilateralism. There has been history of great powers which have been always been prone to exceptionalism, double standards, and bending rules, just sort of breaking them. But the open embrace of a might is right sensibility marks a shift from hypocrisy. Now, what is happening that there is an open embrace of might is right. Sorry. But the open embrace of a might is right sensibility marks a shift from hypocrisy, which at least paid tribute to norms, even while betraying them to indifference, which does not give a damn about norms. When a major power signals that sovereignty is negotiable, others take note. Okay, so example, if Washington can disregard Venezuela's sovereignty with minimal consequence, what stops Beijing from concluding that Taiwan's status is similar malleable? So he's saying that if US can disregard Venezuela's sovereignty, you know that the what has happened that the US has launched military strike or operation whereby they have captured the president of Venezuela, sitting president of the Venezuela from the Venezuela, which means that he has US has basically breached the sovereignty of the Venezuela. So that is what he is saying that if the Washington can disregard Venezuela's sovereignty with minimum consequence, what stops Beijing from concluding that Taiwan's status is immediately malleable? So if Washington can do, then Taiwan Beijing means China can also do the similar thing with Taiwan, and so the Moscow means Russia to Ukraine. Okay, or even New Delhi from deciding that smaller neighbors' objections are an inconvenience rather than a constraint. So New Delhi can also do that with his smaller neighbors. But we know in New Delhi, we know that New Delhi will never do this kind of thing because New Delhi is one of the most law-abiding country in the world. The question ceases to be whether international law prohibits aggression. So, what is the question? Question ceases to be whether international law prohibits aggression, but whether the target is powerful enough to raise the cost of it. Now, for decades, the fear of a third world war acted as grim stabilizer. Okay, so for decade, what was the fear? Fear was that if we do something like if we breach the sovereignty of a country, then there can be a situation where third world war can emerge. Okay, that has stopped country from engaging each other directly or military like war kind of situation has not happened. So that is the grim stabilizer. The horror of total conflict kept less conflicts in check. But if the guardrails weaken, the world risk that not one great conflagration, but a proliferation of smaller grinding bars is too limited to trigger global alarm, yet collectively capable of eroding the foundations of peace. Now, an unraveling of multilateralism. The erosion is compounded by the retreat from multilateralism. So, who is retreating from multilateralism? So, it is the policies of the Trump administration, basically US, who is retreating from multilateralism. You know that the Trump has decided to, put the US out of the WHO. Okay, so that is the example of US retreating from the multilateralism, which is basically eroding the this multilateralism. So let us see. The Trump administration declared withdrawal from dozens of international organizations and agreements. Okay, so this is the example, ranging from UNESCO, WHO to environmental arms control framework, signals a deeper skepticism about the very idea of shared governance. The problem is that the 21st century's most urgent challenges are precisely those that no nation can solve alone. Yes, that is correct. That the problems of the 21st century are those which no single nation can solve alone. Okay. Pandemics, climate. So what are these? So these are pandemics, climate change, cyber threats, financial contagion. These are the problems without passports. In coffee, an arms phrase, indifferent to borders and immune to unilateral solutions. When the world's most powerful state steps back from collective action, the vacuum does not remain empty. Others, most notably China, step in, shaping institutions, norms, and standards in ways that reflect their own preferences. The result is not simply a shift in influence, but a fragmentation of global governance itself. So, what is happening? That the fragmentation of global governance is happening. We inhabit a world that has become profoundly fluid. It is increasingly difficult for any nation, not only India, to say with certainty where it stands in a shifting geopolitical order. Old old certainties have frayed, alliances blur, and ambiguity has become the defining condition of our time. History that indefatigable saboteur of good intentions continues to complicate the present. Grievances are inherent more reliably than wisdom. Old wars cast long shadows, and unresolved injustices continue to poison relations between the states. Leaders are asked to negotiate peace while being reminded never to forget past bounds. Perhaps the most profound obstacle lies in the paradox of power itself. Those entrusted with maintaining global order also possess the greatest capacity to disrupt it. So this is now what is paradox of power. So paradox of power is those entrusted with the maintaining global order also possess the greatest capacity to disrupt it. A world order rested on their willingness not to do so. This willingness has faded in many cases. The institutions established after the Second World War were novel in conception but unequal in design. They reflected the hierarchies of power prevailing at the time of their creation. Authority was concentrated in the hands of a few, while responsibility was shared by all. This imbalance has consequences. When powerful states act as both guardians and exceptions to the rules, the legitimacy of the system suffers. Now, what makes this movement especially fraught is that the rule-based liberal international order was never a monolith. It was a patchwork of norms, institutions, and habits of cooperation. Its ingredients included sovereign equality, non-aggression, collective security, open trade, human rights, and multilateral problem solving. Each of these has been violated repeatedly by great powers and smaller states alike. Yet the order endured because enough states believed that the alternative was wars. Today, that belief is wavering. Sovereignty is breached with increasing brazeness. Non-aggression is honored in the breach. Collective security is paralyzed by vetoes. Collective security is paralyzed by vetoes. Trade is weaponized. Human rights are dismissed as ideological. Multilateral institutions are starved of legitimacy and resources. Institutions may possess statutes and mandates, yet without political will, their authority remains largely aspirational. When powerful states ignore international law or apply it selectively, institutional laws lose credibility. Peace cannot be enforced by rules alone. It requires good faith, and good faith is increasingly in short supply. The danger today, and yet the order is not dead. It limps, it strains, it disappoints, but it persists. International courts still adjudicate disputes. uh, Peacekeepers still deploy. Trade flow still depend on predictable rules. Middle powers from Europe to India to South Africa to Canada to Brazil still invest in multilateralism because they know that without it they are at the mercy of ruthlessly self-interested hegemons. And they accept Dag Hammarskjöld's famous dictum that the United Nations was not created to take mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. Sometimes the best the world order can do is to prevent things from getting worse. So self-interested hegemons, Hammarskjöld. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Hammarskjöld, I think that should be the pronunciation. And yet the question is not whether the old order survives intact. It has already been hollowed out, its norms and institutions subverted. The question is what replaces it: a xenocentric architecture, a world of competing blocks, a patchwork of issue-based coalitions, or a return to unmediated anarchy. We are living in an interregnum, the old world fading, the new one unformed. The danger is not that the system collapses overnight, but that it decays slowly, leaving a vacuum filled by opportunism and coercion. The promise of 1945 was that law could tame power. The peril of today is that power may once again tame law. Uh, the task for this generation is not to resurrect the past, but to prevent the future from sliding into a world where the only real rule is that there are no rules at all. So that's all. So what Shashi Tharoor is trying to say that the new world disorder has arisen. Why? Because of the erosion of the multilateralism. Okay, because of the retreat from multilateralism by US, basically, which is reflected in the policies of the Trump's and Trump's decisions that the US will withdraw, but US has withdrawn from the dozens of international organizations and agreements, ranging from the UNESCO to WHO to environmental and arms control framework. Okay, then recently, what has happened? You all know that the U.S. has breached the sovereignty of the Venezuela and captured the president of Venezuela, Maduro, and uh, and so he is arguing that the this this action of US taking out, oh sorry, not taking out, taking out means killing, okay, yes, so capturing the sitting president from the Venezuela is an example for Beijing to do the same thing while acquiring the Taliban into or integrating Taliban into China. Okay, Similarly, Russia can also do the same with the Ukraine, and India can also say use that excuse with any kind of action with the smaller neighbors. Okay, so that kind of thing, and however, he has also argued that the 21st century problem that are like pandemics, climate change, cyber threats, financial contagion cannot be solved by any country alone. So that for that you need to have the cooperation of many countries. So that is why multilateralism is important. So that is the thing. And then he has talked about the paradox of power. Paradox of power itself, which means that those interested with the maintaining global order also possess the greatest capacity to disrupt it. For example, you have Russia, you have US, you have China. Okay, so they have interested with the maintaining global order. How? Because they are the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Okay, but they are the one who are who are the breacher of the law. Okay, so that is how you see the paradox of power. That is, those interested with the maintaining global order also possess the great capacity to disrupt it. World order rested on their willingness not to do so. This willingness has faded in many cases. The institution established after the Second World War were novel in conception but unequal in design. So, novel in conception, unequal in design means that the all the countries were not given the responsibility. Okay, responsibility in the sense that veto. You see the veto power. Only five countries were given, not the country like India has not given. They reflected the hierarchies of power prevailing at the time of their creation. Okay, so the world order, when it was created in 1947, is now continuing. So in UN reform, we are talking about UN reform. Okay, so then rule-based liberal international order was never a monolith. Ingredients included sovereign equality, non-aggression, collective security, open trade, human rights, and multilateral problem solving. Sovereignty is breached with increasing brazenness. Non-aggression is honored in the breach. Collective security is paralyzed by vetoes. Trade is weaponized. Human rights are dismissed as ideological. Multilateral institutions are starved of legitimacy and resources. Powerful states ignore international law, or when powerful states ignore international law or apply it selectively, institutions lose credibility. Peace cannot be enforced by rules alone. It requires good faith, and good faith is increasingly in short supply. The danger today, so and yet the order is not dead. It limps, it stands, and it disappoints, but it persists. International courts still educate dispute. Peacekeepers still deploy. Trade flow will depend predictable rules. Middle powers from Europe to India to South Africa to Canada to Brazil still invest in multilateralism because they know that without it they are at the mercy of ruthlessly self-interested hegemons. They accept Dag Hamarker's famous dictum that the United Nations was not created to take mankind to heaven but to save humanity from hell. Sometimes the best the world order can do is to prevent things from getting worse. And yet the question is not whether the old order survives intact. It has already been hollowed out. Its norms and institutions are averted. The question is what replaces it: a xenocentric architecture, a world of competing blocks, a patchwork of issue-based coalitions, or a return to unmediated anarchy. We are living in an interregnum. We are living in an interregnum. The old order, the old world fading, the new one unformed. The danger is not that the system collapses overnight, but that it decays slowly, leaving a vacuum filled by opportunism and coercion, like Russia or China. The promise of 1945 was not law. Law could tame power. The peril of today is that the power may once again tame law. The task for this NSA is not to resurrect the past, but to prevent the future from sliding into a world where the only real rule is that there are no rules at all. So that is what is saying. So it is very serious. So how you see very beautifully he has calculating everything that is happening right now. So he has started from the past, highlighting that how the why there was a need of international orders. Okay, new international order. Why? Because the Second World War in 1930s, starting from 1934 to 30, and till 1939, has destroyed lots of things. Okay, so that is why there was a need felt that we need to have cooperation among members, and there should be a international organization which will be working to ensure that the peace and stability in the world should prevail, and that is how the United Nations has been formed. Okay, and so the UN insisted would be the instrument through which nations settle their differences peacefully. Okay, now that is so. What was imagined now is going now is is eroding. Okay, so the prevailing atmosphere is that the contrast with the contemporary mood, where the language of international law increasingly sounds like a polite fiction. Analysts often perceive US President Donald Trump's foreign policy posture as one that treats international rules, much as Italian drivers treat road traffic lights, less as binding commitments and more as optional tools, useful when they serve your interest, dispensable when they do not. It is not that the US invented unilateralism. Great powers have always been prone to exceptionalism, double standards, and bending rules just sort of breaking them. But the open embrace of might is right. Sensibility marks shift from hypocrisy, which at least pay tribute to norms even while betraying them to indifference, which does not give a damn about norms. When a major power signals that sovereignty is negotiable, others take note. If Washington can disregard Venezuela's sovereignty with minimum consequence, what stops Beijing from concluding that the Taiwan's status is similarly malleable, or Moscow from treating Ukraine as historical correction rather than a sovereign state, or even New Delhi from deciding that a smaller neighbor's objections are an inconvenience rather than a constant? The question ceases to be whether international law prohibits aggression, but whether the target is powerful enough to raise the cost of it. For decades, the fear of Third World War acted as a grim stabilizer. The horror of total conflict kept lesser conflicts in check. But if the guardrails weaken, the world risks not one great conflict, conflagration, but a proliferation of smaller grinding wars, each too limited to trigger global alarm, yet collectively capable of eroding the foundations of peace. So unraveling of multilateralism. So from here we have already discussed, okay, how the unraveling of multilateralism is happening. So all we have discussed. So I think now that's it about the editorial part. Okay, here no gain in bargaining. Congress, not the TMK, stand to lose more if it phrase alliance. So not important. India's aviation is in need of data-driven oversight. So this we are going to discuss India's aviation. Okay. Indigo India's Indigo India's largest airline faced an operational crisis in December 2025, leading to surge in fares across the country. This episode underscored a broader issue. India is becoming the world's third largest aviation market without building the data system required to oversee it. In this case, regulators quickly stepped in to protect consumer interests. The Ministry of Civil Aviation imposed. So sorry. The Ministry of Civil Aviation imposed temporary price caps on domestic flights, and Director General of Civil Aviation, uh, prompted by the Competition Commission of India, requested average fare data from Indigo, Air India, SpaceJet, and Akasa between December 1 to 15, 2025 to investigate potential abuse of market dominance. While this reactive approach protects air passengers in the short term, it highlights a larger regulatory gap. Even with the requested data, regulators may still lack the visibility needed to act effectively without a, I think not much important. So we'll leave this one. See, so many things are there in the newspaper, but not everything is important for us. Why? Because we'll see. UPSC will ask only 20 questions, okay, not all the questions, okay. So every day many things are covered, not which are not actually important for all of us. I think today's there are not much things in the news which are important for us. So except the editorial part, which was important, which we have already done. Okay, so let us see the world news. Okay, so Tariq Rahman sworn in as Bangladesh PM. BNP has won. Iran and US agree on guiding principle for future discussions. Okay, now what is he? What is it? It is so US attacks killed 11 people on three alleged drug smuggling boats in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, Caribbean Sea. The US military said on Tuesday the United States began targeting alleged smuggling boats in September last year, killing more than 140 people and destroying dozens of vessels since then. Russia and Ukrainian negotiators on Tuesday began U.S. broker talks in Geneva seeking to end the four-year war hours after both sides launched fresh long-range strikes. U.S. President Donald Trump is seeking to position himself as a peacemaker, but previous talks material by Washington have yielded no breakthroughs. Okay, so again the talks has been started. Now, what is happening here? So, veteran US civil rights activist Jason Jackson, one of the nation's most influential black voices, died on Tuesday. His family said in a statement, he was 84, proteges of Martin Luther King Jr. and a two-time presidential candidate. Jackson led the civil rights movement for decades after the revolt leader's assassination. Ex Prime Minister, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan during misstatement in jail, family claims. Okay, बहुत अच्छा. Then not the sports are not. We are not going to see a sport news. I think science. Maybe there might be a science. Taxes prove futile to burn out cigarette use in India. Okay, cigarette use. So much cigarette smokers are there. Okay, if you are going through Delhi, you will find many people with cigarettes. Okay, at every 1 2 minute, you will find there. India gets first private sector helicopter final assembly line in Kolar. So, India and France defense minister at the virtual inauguration of the facility. So, this is important. Let us see. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday virtually inaugurated a Tata Advanced Systems final assembly line fall uh, for the Airbus H125 helicopter. The facility in Bemagal, Kolar district in Karnataka is India's first private sector helicopter fall. This is the first time India's private sector will undertake the manufacturing, integration, testing, and maintenance of a sophisticated rotary wing platform. The civil H125 will first be built at this facility, and in future the military variant of the helicopter could also be built. The first localized H125 is expected to be delivered early 2027. Will also be available for export across South Asia. Tata Advanced System Limited and Airbus said that the H125M is optimized to serve as a high altitude force multiplier across a spectrum critical missions. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, who was present on the occasion, said the H125 program is investment is anticipated to exceed 1,000 crore. Minister of Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs of France, Catherine Baudrin, said the inauguration of the facility is a testament of fresh Indian defense cooperation Karnataka's large and medium industry minister M.B. Patil said 500 H125 light helicopter will be manufactured over the next 20 years at this facility. Mr. Patil said 17 acres land and been allotted for the project. Okay, I think so. That's all for today's. Uh, we'll do the discussion on this Indian Express in the different video. So thank you very much.